Okay. So let's start off easy. Arkansas. Arkansas was wonderful. Being able to, for me, I went there. I didn't get to spend much time with the kids. I'm not going to lie. I didn't spend any time with the kids. I really went there wanting to work, specifically work and help out. And I did. And it seemed so meaningless as I was doing it, as I'm sitting there rolling walls and washing cars. You just think, like, this means nothing, it's just work. But at least I'm helping, it's getting done. But, like they were saying, the appreciation and the thankfulness and the continuous comments of, thank you for coming, thank you for being here, thank you for everything that you're doing, thank you for washing our car, thank you for, taking out the trash. And the older kids, the ones that are in the apartments, they were just, blown away that we were there to improve their living conditions because they're living there for free, So I'm sure in their head they're probably just thinking, well, it's free, it might not be perfect, but it's free. So just the fact that we were there trying to improve their free housing was just amazing. So Pastor asked me to share a little bit of my testimony. I took some notes because I figured I'd probably have a hard time. It's been a very, very long time since I've thought about my salvation. And, I've been a Christian for about 15 years now, so it's been a while since I've thought about where I came from. And you didn't give me much time either. I had like a day's notice, but I came from a wonderful home. I mean, both parents married, no abuse, no struggles, nothing that you would think of as, a bad environment. I was raised in a great community, good schools, like just all of it. I was raised Catholic. My grandmother, who was my best friend throughout my entire childhood and into my teens, was Catholic, and she would take me to church on Sundays. So I knew God. I've always known about God. I've always believed. I've always had, faith. I have a very successful father, so we never struggled financially. We never really struggled. You could say that I came from a perfect home. But even in perfect homes, sometimes you don't have to go very far for the devil to get to you. And he found me. At 8 years old, I had very, very protective parents. They wouldn't let me go anywhere. I mean, I'm talking about friends' houses, anywhere after school, can't join after school activities because something might happen to you. I mean, we weren't allowed to go anywhere, very, very protective parents. But right about 8 years old, I started to become sexually abused by one of my mom's brothers. Like now thinking back, it's like 8 years old. You're thinking, man, like this is a baby, like the time didn't seem like a baby. Anyways, he started to slowly, sorry if I get a little graphic, guys. I really planned on just sharing bullet points of my life, but after this morning's worship, I just feel very, very strongly led to share a little bit more than just that. Every weekend, he lived with us, so, every weekend he'd start drinking. And once he was drunk, first thing he'd do would come and find me. And it started off very slowly, then it progressed, and it got pretty bad. This went on for a while. About 2 years into it, he attempted to sexually abuse my sisters. And so, of course, there's no way I was going to let that happen. So I made sure that they slept protected in private rooms. And when I heard him, because I knew he was coming, when I'd hear that door open, I'd run over. And somewhere in his head, this translated as I wanted it. If I was running over there, it was because I desired it. And it became more frequent. And then he got one of his cousins. And, they started taking turns, and I'm sorry, a lot of this I haven't even shared with my children, so they started talking about it so openly. And, they'd start joking about it, and, oh, later on tonight, this is what we're going to do. You can go first. Then you can do this, and you can do that. And I honestly can't say that I remember a lot of it, because after going through counseling, my counselor told me that I blocked out a lot of it because it was too much for my brain and my emotions to handle and cope with. But anyways, this went on for 4 years. And when I was 12 years old, I finally got the courage to tell somebody, And I told my mother. And I told her, your brother's been doing this, and that. And of course, my mom immediately ran over, confronted him, had this huge fight, and I could see them. They were standing in the back of the room at a church because it was at a wedding. And my uncle just started crying and weeping, and he threw himself on his knees, and he was saying he was sorry, and my mom leaned over, and she hugged him, and she picked him up. And they hugged for a while, and then he walked away. And she came over to me and said, he said he's really sorry. He will never do it again. Do not tell your father, because it's going to cause a lot of problems in our family. Do you understand? Yes, I understand. So, at that moment, I felt like I lost my mother and my father because of what she had said. Now, my mother's a wonderful woman. I think in her heart she truly believed him. But I think now, knowing what I know, we know that abusers don't stop. And they didn't. And it got worse. And it continued for a while, late into my teens. And then when I was 13, I thought I found love. I had been searching for love because I knew what I was experiencing and what I was going through was not love. But I desired it so much. My dad, like I said, he was very successful, and he's a wonderful, hardworking man who always provided for us. But we all know that with providing and being successful comes sacrifice. And he had no time for our children, for his children, us, So I never saw my father. I never saw him. But I had everything. And to him, that was very important because he came from nothing. So he was, living on the streets. And for him, providing for us was the ultimate goal in life. So I don't hold that against him. I'm just stating that because of that, I didn't have that father figure in my life. So I very much desired to find true love. At 13, what can you really know about love, right? But I thought I knew it. And first boyfriend, thought he was going to cherish me forever. I had never dated anybody else or been with anybody else, besides the abuse. So I just gave him my entire heart. And within a year, because I didn't see him much, he didn't live where we lived, so I only saw him occasionally throughout the year. Within a year, I caught him. I came back to visit him, and I caught him making out with one of my friends. So that just destroyed me, crushed me, lost all hope. But then at 15, my parents gave me the approval to actually date. So I started dating, and I thought, okay, this time I found love. This time I found a guy that's going to cherish me and take care of me. I mean, he's saying all the right things. He's doing all the right things. On the surface, he seemed amazing. And he, about a month into it, started trying to pressure me into sex. And even though I was being sexually abused, I was still a virgin. So I guess I should clarify that. It was bad, but I was still a virgin. So of course there was no way I was going to do this, but, I made concessions and I made compromises, and we would stay home when my parents were gone, and we'd, be alone together in rooms, and I put myself in situations that I shouldn't have put myself into. And I say that now because I look out at so many young girls, and they end up being pressured into things that if they hadn't been in that situation, if they hadn't put themselves in that spot, if they hadn't, been alone with that boy, it probably wouldn't have happened. But I did it. I put myself in a situation where I was alone with this boy. And he knew where I stood on the sex part of it, but he ended up forcing himself on me. He did end up raping me. It's very hard to explain to people that somebody that you're dating can do that to you because they're your boyfriend. You've kissed them. You've held their hands. You've probably confessed your love to one another. So the thought that somebody could do that is just not believable. So when you tell somebody, so-and-so did this to me, first reaction I got was, are you sure you didn't ask for it? Are you sure you didn't want it? Are you sure? And I'm thinking to myself, you mean as I screamed and yelled and cried and begged for him to stop? Yeah, I'm pretty dang sure that I didn't want this. But none of that matters. And in my head, I had already lost my family. I had lost my parents, not physically, but just emotionally. I wasn't attached to them anymore. And this one guy that I trusted ended up doing that. And it just progressed from there. It just snowballed, and it got to the point where he was constantly threatening me. If I didn't do it, he was going to kill himself. If I didn't do it, he was going to kill himself. And the pressure of having this person that you care for saying that they're going to kill themselves because you're the only good thing that they have, the only thing that they're living for, tell you that they're going to take their life if you don't give in to their demands. I remember just laying there. Whatever he wanted to do, just go ahead. And I just lay there. There was no emotion. There was no connection. But eventually it became too much. I couldn't cope with it mentally anymore. And again, I reached out to my mom. I didn't know who else to go to, so I reached out to my mom. And she told me, he's manipulating you. There's no way in hell this kid has the courage to kill himself. You tell him next time he tells you, to do something, and he tells you, I'm going to kill myself if I don't, you tell him, go ahead and do it. So I did. Next time, broke up with him. He threatened to kill himself. I said, go ahead and do it. He drove over that morning to our home. His sister contacted me at 4 o'clock in the morning, said Eddie took my dad's gun, he stole the car. He woke me up and told me he's coming over and he's going to kill you. He said if he can't have you, nobody else is going to. So, of course, 4 o'clock in the morning, I'm panicking. This guy's coming over with a loaded gun to kill me. Knock on the door, I wake up my parents. Upset them because, why would you be waking me up at 4 o'clock in the morning just to give them this horrible news? My mother was like, he's lying. There's no way he's coming. My dad was like, call the cops. So he did. He called the cops. And the cops showed up, backed up into our driveway. Within 30 seconds, he was there. And I opened up the window to see him. And I started pounding and yelling for him, not to do it, to think about it. Because I kept hearing in my head that he had told me many times, I am never going back to juvie. If I go back to juvie, I'm not going. I won't do it. I'll kill myself before I do that. And so I'm pounding and yelling at him, not to do it. He pulls out the gun, and he starts shooting at me. And thankfully, he only hit the house. But I run down the stairs even after he shot at me trying to save him, because I just felt like his life and his spirit and his soul weighed on me. I was carrying him around. And I ran out to him, and the cops threw me back in to the house, and I stood up and I ran back, and right as I ran to his car, like to go get to his car, he grabbed the gun. And he did it. He blew out his brains in front of me, and he was 16 years old, guys. 16. He came from a very abusive family. Parents were drug addicts. Father was extremely abusive to the mother. His sister was a prostitute. He came from a terrible home, the worst that you could think of. And this 16-year-old boy found that his life was so miserable, so awful, that he actually took his life and ended it all. At least what he thought was the end. After that happened, I wasn't a very popular girl in high school, so not a lot of people knew who I was. But everybody found out about that. Everybody found out about the suicide. And I remember sitting in class and hearing all of my peers, my so-called friends, or not really friends because they didn't know me well, but my peers, my classmates, talk about how awful I was and how I should have killed myself and how it shouldn't have been him. It should have been me. And that this poor guy was so in love with me, and I treated him so badly that I drove him to take his own life. I was 15 at the time. What that does to a 15-year-old, mentally, I can't even begin to explain. Carrying the weight of somebody else's life on you and having everybody in your surroundings blaming you for it. You start to believe it at one point. You start to believe that it's your fault. So I remember going to my dad and saying, "Dad, I don't know how to fix this. I don't know what to do. I'm so lost." And expecting comforting words, he tells me, "I told you you were too young to date. This is why you don't date when you're 15. You have no idea what you're doing or what you're getting yourself into." Now, I know he meant that in a loving way, and in his mind, he wishes I would have listened when he told me I wasn't old enough to date, but I didn't listen. But at the moment, I needed not to be scolded for my wrong decisions. I needed comfort. And I didn't get that. So from that moment on, I started cutting. And I started trying to plan out my suicide and how I was going to do it. I didn't want to do it in front of my siblings. They were too little to have to witness what I witnessed. So right in the middle of all of this, his sister, now it's been about a month, they've had time to rehash it over. She wanted to take me out. So she got her gang. She was part of a gang. There's a lot of gangs in California. She got her gang to come start showing up at my school
and showing me their guns and telling me that they were going to wait till I got out of school to shoot me. So I went to the counselor. I told him what was going on. My parents snatched me up early from school, and they threw me on a plane, and they sent me off to Mexico. Now, mind you, school is the only thing I've ever been good at. I've always been a straight A student. This is my senior year, or my junior year, going into my senior year. It was the end of my junior year. I get thrown into Mexico for a couple months until things cool down. And when I come back, I'm told by my school that I can't go back to school because I've missed too much school, and now I'll have to go to a continuation school. Now, for a straight A student, a perfectionist, that just pushed me over the top. That was it. My life was over. I was carrying the weight of his death. Didn't have school anymore. I had lost all my friends. My parents, I felt, weren't there for me. But at least I had my grandmother, who was always there for me. She always comforted me. She always found the right words to say. And right before I left to Mexico, she tells me, please don't go. Don't go. Just stay home. I will take care of you. And I said, Grandma, I gotta go. You don't understand. And we couldn't tell her anything because she was elderly, so we couldn't tell her that there was these people trying to take me out. So she tells me, if you go, when you come back, I won't be alive. She's the closest person I've ever known that was that close to God. And I just knew when she told me, I believed her. I knew she was right. And sure enough, I left, and while I was gone, she passed away. So then I lost my best friend, the only comfort I had never known. You can imagine by that time where I'm at. So now, since I was a woman of faith and I had been raised in church, I hated God. I wish I could have been like you, Keith, where I could say, no, my faith stayed strong. It didn't. I lost all of my faith and I hated God. And I knew that if he allowed all of this to happen to me, he was awful. There was no way he could be a loving God. And just to get back at him, I was going to make sure that I took out as many people as I could on my way down. And I did. I realized that I was decent looking, and I could flirt, and I could seduce guys, and I could get them to fall for me and find out all of their insecurities, everything, their deepest, darkest secrets of what they felt the worst about themselves, and I would attack them the moment they released that information to me. And I just went on this vicious cycle, and I started destroying every man that I could find, because in my head, men were the problem. That's where it had all started. That's where it rooted from. And I was going to take as many of them out as I could. And then when I turned, I did this for about 1.5 years. And when I realized that I still was not finding peace in destroying all of these other people's lives, I knew there was something else, so I started going to a counselor. And at the time, it meant nothing to me, but now, looking back, she's what turned my life around. She was a Christian counselor. I didn't know this. But her words of wisdom, the love in her eyes, the comforting words that she gave me was something that I had never experienced in my life. You know, stuff that my parents should have been telling me, my peers, my friends, my relatives should have been telling me. She was telling me, and she barely knew me. And I knew that God was speaking to me. So as I went through this counselor, I started to feel better about myself, and I met my first husband. Thought I found love again. You know, I was 18. Thought I was in love. did the only thing I knew how to do at that point in my life, and I gave myself over to him. Within a month, I was pregnant with my beautiful daughter, Ellie. We ended up getting married, and I thought, now that he's my husband, I can share some of my life trials with him. I did. The moment I told him my history, he told me that, I don't think I can say it, it's not PG enough, but pretty much that I was now his sex slave. And I had no control over my body or what I wanted to do with it anymore. Because I was so filthy, so dirty, so disgusting that nobody would touch me. But since he was stuck with me, because we had got married, that now I did what he said. And I did, for years and years. And he cheated over and over again. And it finally got to the point where I just couldn't take that anymore either. So I filed for divorce. And here I am, 20 years old, 2 kids, horrible past, horrible education now, and divorced to top it all off. And he tells me, just kill yourself. The girls would be better off with you dead than having a slut for a mother. Do it. Do it. And let me tell you guys, I was this close to doing it. Again, started plotting my suicide. But I wanted to spend one last Christmas with my kids. And he knew that. He knew that I was to the point where I was just so far gone with life, and that my girls were the only thing I had. So he came up for Christmas, and he took them, and he didn't give them back. So here I am on Christmas Day, kidless, in the middle of a divorce, desperate. So I went to church, the only place I knew I could go, right? I walked in, I sat way in the back, and I'm telling you that God rescued me that day. If there was not a single other person in that church, it wouldn't have mattered, because God was speaking directly to me. I was there to hear what he had to say, to hear that he loved me, that I wasn't abandoned, that I was valuable, that I was worthy, and that he would take all the sin and all the things that I had done and that had been done to me, and he would wash them away, and I would be wiped clean as snow. And from that moment on, I clung to him like no other. I lost my family because of it. My parents did not approve of me being a Christian. They outcasted me for 1.5 years. I wasn't allowed to come around. My sisters were really young. They probably don't remember a lot of this. But it didn't matter, because I had God. And he gave me a sense of joy and a sense of peace and a sense of worth that I had never felt before. He restored me completely. He transformed me. I never looked back, not once. And now, I think, what if I had committed suicide? What if I had thought that I wasn't worthy? What if I had listened to the lies of the devil and had just stopped my life? I wouldn't have the wonderful husband that I have now, the beautiful children that I have now. I mean, you know, this slut of a mother now has a daughter leading worship and another one leading the youth small groups. God is amazing, and he can transform any lives. There's nothing that you've done that's too far gone for him. There's nothing that you've been through that he can't fix. There's nothing that you're going to do that he can't help you come back from. Thanks, guys.
Amen.